Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session of Research Skills Refresh. Today, we are going to be talking about search strategies. My name is Liz Svoboda. I am the Instruction and Outreach Librarian here at Flint. So please, if you have any questions during the session, go ahead and pop them into chat. And my colleague Emily Newberry is on the line, and we'll be watching those, and we'll try to get to those towards the end. I will say that this session is very kind of theoretical in a lot of ways. I'm not actually going to be doing a ton of demoing of anything because it's really starting to think about how to be strategic, while you are searching for your research and for your research projects that are coming up. So on today's agenda, we're going to talk about, why are you researching, starting to think about what types of sources that you need to find information from, the type of information that you're looking for, as well as like what do you have access to. At U of M Flint, you have access to a lot more than the general public does because of just the access that you have through the library, right? Not everybody has access to an academic library. We're going to talk about a little bit what databases are versus some other search tools, and then go in a little bit to developing search terms, and then finally, again, as always, staying organized while you're searching is so important. All right. So initially, you might think, why are you researching? And that's going to be to fit in an assignment, right? You're going to be writing a paper. You are assigned something by your professor, whether that's a PowerPoint project or a video or some group project. But really, when you're researching, you need to kind of think about what kind of level of research do you need for information, right? Are you looking to do your own research and you need to find additional sources that support your theory in some way, or that you want to be in conversation with? Are you intending to publish or produce or distribute the work in some way? Or is this something that, is a little bit more off the cuff, that you are learning about a topic for fun or as a hobby, and maybe you don't necessarily need quite the level of credibility that you would if you were going to publish, or maybe you just need something really quick to verify a fact, okay? So these are a couple of the different reasons why you could be researching, but there are others, especially as you go up through grad school and into if you're actually going to become an academic or a researcher full time, and you're actually producing original research. Then we really need to be up in that kind of high level of looking for evidence to support or be in conversation with. Most of the time, like when we just look up something on Google, we're just verifying a fact or want to check something really quick. We don't necessarily need to go through all of these different searching that we're doing. So again, kind of tied in with why are we researching? We need to think about what level of evidence do we need? Are we referring to another scholar's work? Again, we need that high level. So then we're going to be looking in academic journals and possibly some gray literature, which are reports and other things that don't go through like a formal peer-reviewed process. They don't come up in academic journals, but they're published by like think tanks, some government organizations, nonprofits who are advocating for something, but there is still research that's being done. It just doesn't go through the academic channels as much. Again, are you looking for more current information? Are you looking for historical information? Looking at news sites or newspapers, things like policies or legal sources. Where can I find that information that I need? Or is it, again, just fun? Can I just rely on IMDb if I'm looking for who is in this movie, right? So thinking again about what evidence we need, and especially how we are going to be using that evidence, what we're actually producing with our research, is going to help you answer these questions. And again, continuing on, do we need background information or original evidence? So again, are we looking for kind of a summary, an overview of a topic? We don't necessarily need to know, if a scientist did an experiment and what those results are, or maybe we do need that primary evidence of that original research. Are we looking for qualitative or quantitative data, right? Are we looking at things in a very mathematical standpoint? Are we looking for that kind of human interaction and gathering that data to kind of see what the perception of something is, okay? And even beyond all these different things, there are these kind of, in academic literature, levels of evidence. So There are particular types of experiments or journals, articles that are written that kind of the more um, let me phrase it this way. If you start off at the kind of baseline with an individual study, you do one experiment, you do one survey, and you report out on that. Maybe there's a specific methodology that you're supposed to be using that's a best practice in your field, right? That kind of bumps the level of evidence up. And you can go all the way up to things like systematic reviews or even what's called a meta-analysis, where you are looking over what other people have done and kind of synthesizing that data to find best practices. And actually, my colleague who's on the line, she did a really great series of webinars last year about systematic reviews and other types of reviews. So check those out on the YouTube when you have a chance, if you need to, again. So thinking about, kind of how much credibility and how much support you need for your research is going to be really impactful here. Once you kind of figure out what level of evidence you need, what types of things you need to think about who is going to be putting this out. Okay. Who is the information produced by, and also who is the audience that it is intended for. So if you're a scientific researcher, whether that's in education or chemistry, or even like a history researcher, you're most likely going to be producing for other researchers, maybe the general public. And in that case, you're going to be producing that information and publishing that information in academic journals, maybe books, depending again, kind of on what your field is. If you're a policymaker, right, and you're doing surveys and kind of polling data and figuring out what's going on, you're going to be, publishing it to either a government site or maybe a nonprofit or organization site. Sometimes they'll go into kind of repositories of data that are out there that are, held by different libraries around the world. Sometimes for practitioners or professionals, so someone who isn't necessarily doing original research, but is, writing about their own experience and going to publish that for other colleagues who are working at kind of the same level. A lot of the times there's going to be newsletters coming out of professional organizations or what we call trade publications. So these are, basically kind of magazines or news sites that are geared toward a specific field, but they don't go through that rigor of peer review, and they often don't have like original research that's published in. A lot of blogs kind of follow in this professional practitioner area. And then, general public, right? So this is everybody could have an interest in it. A lot of news sources, magazines, entertainment websites fall into this category too, right? And then how do you want this information to be presented? Are you seeking others' opinions? Are you looking for less biased information, more objective things? Are you looking maybe for statistics? And again, who would be creating those statistics? Who would care about this data? Now, once you kind of think this through, now you need to figure out what access do you have? What library do you have access to? Are you able to, do you have a public library? Are you a student or a faculty member? If you aren't a student or faculty member, do you have a local public university, and what access do you have to their library? We at the University of Michigan Flint, we do have limited public access. If you come in off the street and you want help with researching something, you have access to our online resources as long as you're on our Wi-Fi, right? A lot of public universities have similar policies, but again, you have to like physically be on campus. If you are just relying on a public library, what kind of interlibrary loan services do they have? Do they have any databases? What does your state level library have? There are options post-graduation, or if you aren't part of or aren't affiliated with a university library, there are options out there. They are a little bit more limited, but they are there. If you are able to get access to libraries, like what kind of databases are more relevant to your field? Are you in healthcare, so you're looking at PubMed? Are you an engineer, so you're going to be looking at IEEE Explore or Web of Science, maybe chemistry, or ERIC, or using the database ERIC for education. Okay. There are a lot of free databases out there, but like the Directory of Open Access Journals or Directory of Open Access Books, but they tend to be really broad and encompassing. Sometimes there will be, freely available things like ArchiveX, which is full of preprint material. So like before something goes out into a journal and scholars want to share that kind of non-official version that's out there. So there are a lot of things that you can have access to, but kind of learning those that are more geared to your field is going to be really useful. Looking at, whether or not you require a login or subscription, what kind of privacy policies do they have? How are they using your data, if there is anything like that? And if the information is just freely available online, why is it free, right? Is there a bias there? Are they trying to persuade you of something or sell you something? Or are they just providing this out of the goodness of their hearts? If it's a government institution, like even the state of Michigan or the federal government, a lot of their mandates from those kind of offices or departments, for example, they have a mandate to provide information to the public for some reason for the greater good, basically, typically. But again, they're using those tax dollars to support different programs and things. So again, figuring out kind of why something is free is always a good idea. All right, so a note on, I've used the term databases a whole lot, and then there's other search tools that are out there. A database is definition, it's kind of a contained environment of research, right? It's not, you have to database creators have to input records in order to make them searchable and findable. There's usually a lot of help within a database to, create good searches, to filter that information. And really, people use databases every single day. Amazon is a huge database of things to buy, right? So the kind of structure that you see with a database should be fairly familiar. But with things that are marketed to scholars and libraries, there's definitely some additional help and guidance and tools that you can use to access that information, to save it, and to create really good searches. Search engines, on the other hand, are kind of how a lot of people are going to be using the internet. So Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo is a new one is one that's come out recently. And these are, basically computer programs often created by for-profit companies. So they are kind of run by ads and supported by ad dollars. And they're looking for index web pages across the internet. Now they are indexed in a way so they don't these web pages aren't owned by that company, but they are discovered and kind of kept track of. There are a lot of web pages that are not searchable through these. There are things that are in the quote dark web, or things that are behind paywalls that aren't necessarily able to access so easily. And they really don't have these kind of sophisticated user interfaces. So there's no way to really filter results. There's less ways to filter results. There's less ways to kind of create and save items. You have to kind of rely on outside tools to bookmark things and to save them. So as an FYI, the other thing that I should have put on here this afternoon, I didn't think about, generative AI, that is actually not actually searching anything. Generative AI doesn't actually own any of the content that it's typically doesn't own any of the content that it's trained upon. And it's not actually, again, leading you back to individual searches. They're just kind of giving you or creating a response to the prompt based on the probability of the language models that it's based on. So FYI, and the kind of difference that you're seeing there. So again, just to kind of give you a good comparison of library databases and some search engines. Library databases cost, you're included in tuition or fees, or if it's a public library, right, the public library is paying with that through the money that's raised through tax dollars or millages or something. Search engines, they're based on advertising revenue for the most part. There's a few out there that are trying to not do that, but Google definitely is, Bing definitely is as well. For the privacy and security, again, in library, they usually don't collect a lot of data on what your searches is or who you are. You can create an account, but typically that's held within the database and it's not shared with the library even. We get a little bit of information about how many times somebody searches and how many times people get results and things, but it's not as sophisticated and there isn't as much, we don't really pay attention to it. Libraries are very good about usually really good about keeping your data private. Search engines and even things on the internet, they collect a lot of data, right? There's cookies all over the place. There's people that track, and I'm sure you know, like if you kind of even glance at a Facebook ad later on, like the next day or something, you're going to see some additional ads that kind of follow you around the internet. So there are these programs that are built into the internet that rely on your data to, again, support the internet in a lot of ways. With reliability, this is a way to kind of get access to things. I'm not even going to touch on credibility because credibility is a very situational item. So what makes a source of information credible kind of depend or what makes a source of information credible will change based on the situation that you're in. Okay. But I will say that library databases are typically less, there's usually less change in how you're able to access them. The interfaces usually stay the same. The content is usually pretty static. But with things that are coming from a search engine and on the internet, it is changing every single day, right? So something that was there the next day, maybe that company goes bankrupt and it's no longer there. Hopefully it was kind of archived by the Internet Archive, but even there, they're just getting like a screenshot of what that page was. So again, the internet and search engines are a little bit less stable in some ways with that. And again, those features, there's definitely more advanced features and but again, with those kind of advanced filters and tools and stuff, you are less flexible in how you kind of create searches and create queries. Whereas search engines, again, not as much extra kind of bells and whistles, but they handle natural language searches much better. When I say natural language, it's how you would naturally ask the question, right? So how does this work? Or what does this do? Or who is this? Like those kind of questions are handled much better by search engines, not so much by the library databases when we really want to be pulling out individual search terms to create our searches. Within the library database, within the library, you may be kind of used to having or using, especially on our homepage, the search box that, you search whatever and a bunch of different results come up, and it's interdisciplinary, right? It is pulling from political science, it is pulling from nursing, it is pulling from biology, it is pulling from education, depending on what your search terms are. It is trying to be relevant, right? But it is a wide, broad aspect. It's pulling research journals, articles from magazines, books, streaming media, music, even, again, depending on what your search terms are. So a lot of our students kind of start there just because it's a little bit easier to get them kind of used to a more sophisticated search interface. But as you progress in your studies, especially as you're getting into those 300, 400 level classes, especially grad classes, you should really be looking at some subject specific databases. These are curated databases that focus on typically one academic field or even like a subset of academic field. So things like CINAHL and PubMed, which are big into healthcare and medicine. PubMed is the largest collection of biomedical information in the world. PsycInfo for psychology, ERIC education, opposing viewpoints is really good for social issues. We have things like Adam Matthew for archival primary sources, Scopus and Web of Science for natural physical science. Sometimes social sciences will pop up in there as well, things like sociology, anthropology. And then we even have specialized databases for business students, like Mergent is great for company information. We also have industry level databases, right? So there's a lot of different ways that this information is kind of marketed and packaged. So again, once you get in there into those upper level classes, going into the subject specific databases is going to help kind of ease the irrelevant results and get you more focused into what you need. But the same kind of strategies of like using database operators, using filters, finding key terms or subject terms, those are the same pretty much across all the databases. It's just the interfaces, the user interfaces that will look a little bit different. And actually, so I'm going to skip over here to the library homepage and give you a little bit of a taste of some of these that look different. So for example, if we're looking at opposing viewpoints, and we'll grab Eric here, and we'll just go into PsycInfo because I know those are 3 different ones. from three major database companies. So Opposing Viewpoints is from Gale, is definitely geared more towards kind of beginning level researchers, some even high schoolers, but they're going to kind of how they actually structure their database is a little bit different. So if I'm actually looking for things like teenagers to borrow a topic that we used last time, you're going to see, again, a results list that is broken up kind of by the publication that it's in. So you see academic journals here, you see viewpoints, which are essays written specifically for this database. You're going to see some videos that are kind of pulled out, audio, news sources, magazines, right? So they're taking out and looking at those different formats of sources automatically, okay? But you still are able to filter your results over here by things like publication date, subjects, document types over here. You could limit to peer-reviewed journals. It just is, again, a very different interface than something you may have seen. Whereas something with like Eric, again, pretty similar search box here, but again, those filters are here. You're going to see some of these different tools that you can use to actually save and access these items. The filters are going to be a little bit different. So you see things like education level, because this is for education majors, for example, in addition to things like publication, document type, subject. And again, even if we go into psych info and do a really basic search, again, looks really similar to what we saw in Eric. The filters are over here. You've got that full text, peer reviewed, but you have additional filters, right, that are specific to psychology. So things like methodology or test and measures, population groups, gender, age. These are, again, really specific to that field. And again, the databases will change based on what academic field they are catering to.
Liz, can I say something real quick? Just
Sure thing.
Whoops, let me turn on my camera real quick. There we go. Sorry, right late on. One thing you may want to keep in mind too is that these databases tend to be like Liz was saying, they're discipline specific, but it's also kind of like big box stores. I like to compare it to that. So like you might go to like Dick's Sporting Goods, right? But you also might go to Target, and they may sell some of the same products. So you may see some of the same articles and results coming up in multiple databases. But each one also has a lot of unique content. So it's sort of like shopping in that way, where you might want to check 3 or 4 databases because it's not going to be identical. They are going to have different content. So even if you're checking in a database that's like sort of tangential to your topic, or like one of those cross-disciplinary ones, you may see some cross-disciplinary information where it's like you're really focused on the economics of healthcare, for example. But if you're just searching in healthcare, you may miss those articles that were published in an economics journal. So kind of like Liz was saying, jumping around between the two to duplicate your search is a good idea. She showed you how they're different, but you can also get really great different results between the different databases if you check them all.
I really like that analogy, Emily, and I'm going to steal it because that makes so much sense. So back to our regularly scheduled program. All right. So for search terms, the language that people use to talk about topics is going to change based on their purpose, right? If you are talking to your friends, you're going to use very different kind of insider language, inside jokes, that kind of thing. The slang is different than if you're talking to someone who's older than you, or maybe to someone you've never met before. You may speak a little bit more formally. Same thing happens in writing, okay? So those sources that are, geared towards the general public, they're going to use more general language. They are not going to use as much jargon. They're going to give you a little bit more explanation, hopefully, about what they're talking about. When you get into those upper level academic research, that peer-reviewed original research, you're going to see a lot more jargon that is based in those academic texts, right? So to pick on a medical term, myocardial infarction is going to be used by doctors, healthcare practitioners, rather than the more layman term of heart attack, which is something that a doctor may use, but when they're talking to a patient and kind of relaying and making that code switch rather than to their other peers. So when you're looking in the library, I talked about this a little bit already, but the library databases don't really do well with natural language searching. So you're not going to put in full sentences. You're going to try to break up your research question into these nouns and noun phrases that you can kind of combine to get at what you're looking for. You also are often, it's also often useful to develop a list of synonyms and related terms. So for example, if I'm talking about social media, maybe I also want to include social media networks. Maybe I want to start talking about specific platforms that are being used, right? If I'm talking about teenagers, maybe I also want to throw in the term young adults in there, or adolescents, right? And also thinking about these related terms, they could be synonyms. So again, heart attack, similar to myocardial infarction, just two different things. Teenagers and adolescents, really similar. Or they could be broader or narrower terms, right? So children is a broader, more inclusive term than kindergartners. Kindergartners is more specific. Same thing with air pollution versus smog, right? Smog is a very particular type of air pollution that we're looking at. So again, depending on what you're looking for, this is where you need to kind of bring in those additional terms, and also to see what is being described by these databases. A lot of them will have subject terms that are controlled by the database and kind of assigned by the database to those particular articles, so that, you know, relevant articles are kind of related to each other and they come up a lot. So it's always a good idea to actually look at those. So for example, going back into, we'll go into psych info here. Once we look at a particular article, or actually we'll just look at this dissertation and thesis here, you'll see that there are some keywords that are associated with it, and these are usually given kind of by the author as an example of what they think their work is about. But then down below or somewhere else in this list is going to be subjects that are, again, are assigned and controlled by the database. So adolescent development, community involvement, online social networks and social media, which again, sometimes they're really close, right? But social networking sites, online social networks. So it's really often just a rephrasing. And again, the type of subjects that are included in these lists of subject terms can get incredibly specific. Emily can tell you all about the medical subject headings that are used in PubMed. They are incredibly specific, incredibly detailed. Eric also has an incredible thesaurus that you could actually use to see, go to advanced search. A lot of the times these subject-specific databases will have a thesaurus that will actually help you develop those subject terms and help you get more specific in your looking as well. So again, so many additional tools when you're looking online.
One more statement about the thesauruses too. These are fantastic tools that a lot of people don't understand. And if you want to understand them, Liz and I would be happy to go through them. They are not the same from database to database though. So be aware of that too. Each database that has a thesaurus, it's going to be unique. So an example I love to use, and I think they've changed it, but in CINAHL, they used to classify topics about LGBT issues as GLBT. But if you went into PubMed, it was under LGBT. That's just like an example of they can be like just slightly off. So you always want to check the thesaurus for the database that you're using and not rely on a thesaurus from a different database because you saw a term somewhere else. But yeah, they're fantastic tools if you want to get to know them.
All right. So I'm not going to go too much into developing the topics and stuff at this point because we talked about that in another one. But again, this is what we have for today. But again, staying organized. I know if you guys come to additional sessions of this, you'll probably hear us a lot, but staying organized and on top of your sources is such a good idea. We have those research logs that are there on the research process guide from the library. I'm just going to show it just in case you forgot, or if someone else is new is watching, but under research help, go down to the research process guide. And we do have some downloads that are, these two right now are linked out to a Google document or a Google sheet that you can make a copy of. I think I'm going to actually create a Word doc or in a like Excel sheet that you can download in case people aren't using Google for some reason. But these are here to help you, again, stay organized and kind of on top of what you're looking for. And then if you have any questions for us, please reach out to a librarian. We have our Ask Us page. My contact information is down here, but you can find Emily's direct contact information on the library's website. We're recording all these lovely webinars. We've got a ton of video tutorials. And again, we're always here to help.
Thank you for watching this recorded webinar. Find upcoming webinars to register for at libcal.umflint.edu.